6 new dishes just got added to the game, and it's looking like 3 of them are meta-defining. Welcome back to another Pokemon Sleep video, it's Bro Vinny here. Today we'll be looking at the data mine from the most recent update, and looking at the new ingredient and the 6 new dishes that's been added to the game, which you could cook right now if you actually had coffee beans. Out of the 6, 5 of them require coffee beans. I will also briefly touch on some new information about the 3 new Pokemon. And it turns out they're all ingredient specialists, which I guess came as a surprise to most people. But I can't say I'm upset about that, because that opens up more opportunities for doing things like running dual specialists and allows you to hunt your ingredient specialists in more areas. Now you can find the information on these 6 new dishes over at Cerebi.net or Rainanix Calculator. There are 2 new dishes per dish type. So for curry, we've got Dizzy Punch Spicy Curry and Hidden Power Perk-up Stew, which is the new strongest curry dish. For salad, we've got Cross Chopped Salad and Defiant Coffee Dress Salad, which is the strongest salad. And for desserts, we've got Early Bird Coffee Jelly and Zing Zap Spice Cola, and cola being the strongest dessert. In all 3 dish types, the new dish that is not meta-defining is more or less catered to newer players or players who haven't fully unlocked their pot size yet. On the contrary, if you want to cook the strongest dish, such as Hidden Power Perk-up Stew, you will need to run some sort of pot expansion such as Good Chem Ticket or Cooking Power-up Pokemon. For the rest of this video, just to keep the analysis simple, I'm going to assume that you have no problems meeting the pot size requirements. Let's go over to the Rainanix calculator and have a look at how the dish strength ranks of these new dishes. In curries, Perk-up Stew uses the largest dish size, which is a good thing because we want the recipe bonus to apply to as many ingredients as possible. But on top of that, the dish itself also has the largest current recipe bonus, which is 61%. Whereas Dizzy Punch Spicy Curry only has 35% and a 33 recipe size. And these curries are all ranked in order of their base strength. Now, if we take it to level 60, the strength of Perk-up Stew is 57,000 without area bonus. And Keema Corn Curry, which is now the 2nd best dish, is 41,000. And if we divide one by the other, we see that it's a 40% power up compared to the previous strongest curry, which is Keema Corn Curry. And if you ask me, that's a really big power creep. But if you're wondering where you're going to pull 92 ingredients 3 times a day, well, that's why level 60 ingredient unlock exists. And we can now really see the value of unlocking level 60 on ingredient specialists. So which ingredient specialists are we talking about? For beans, we're looking at Golem or possibly Tyranitar if that's the choice you've made. For tomatoes, we're looking at Victory Bell being the best tomato farmer, or possibly a Bomber Snow if you've got an egg farmer already. For mushrooms, either Quagsire or Gengar, depending on which investment you decided to make. So you'll be seeing the Pokemon I just listed being in a lot of use in order to cook this stew. As for salads, Defiant Coffee Dress Salad uses the largest current recipe size, which is 100 ingredients. It also has 61% recipe bonus, and together giving you a base strength without area bonus of 61,000. And that's actually huge, because the problem with salad previously was that its strength wasn't that great. Between curry, salad, and desserts, salad had the weakest dish, but that has changed with this update. Salad now has the strongest dish of all. In fact, it's so strong compared to the previous strongest salad, which was Ninja Salad, it is 73% stronger, with the added advantage that the 3 ingredients besides coffee are actually fairly easy to farm. Sausage, we've got Charizard, and lots of berry specialists do sausages as well. We've got Toxicroak for oil. Some people have settled for an oil Dragonite. And then there's also the option of running Cramorant or Ditto for oils. For potato, we've got Meowscarada or possibly Victory Bell. Interestingly, the other new recipe for salad doesn't require coffee at all. It uses ingredients that we already had. The problem with this dish, Cross Chopped Salad, is that it requires 20 eggs and probably probably by now you know that eggs are pretty hard to find. So to me, cross-chopped salad, I'll probably just cook the one time just to unlock the recipe and then never cook it again. Because it's got a low recipe bonus, a fairly low recipe size, and requires eggs, which is fairly hard to farm unless you've got an amazing Delibird or a Abomasnow. Or perhaps in the new Pokemon, we might get another egg farmer. As for desserts, the current strongest dish is Spice Cola, which has 87 recipe size and also 61% recipe bonus. Compared to Flower Give Macaron, which by the way was the previous strongest dish in the game across all three dish types, it's only about a 26% improvement. So if for some reason you can only cook macarons and can't cook cola, well, the difference isn't as huge between these two. And to make things worse for desserts, Zing Zap Spice Cola is really annoying to farm because it requires 20 leeks. And to date, we don't have amazing leek farmers. We don't even have a mono option. Now, I personally haven't got a good Fuecoco yet, but this dish requires 35 apples. So hopefully you've got a nice Skeledirge and Quaquaval to farm the ingredients for this dish. Are we likely to see one of the new ingredient specialists with leeks as a base ingredient? I'm not too sure about that because it will be very soon after Quaquaval's release to be power creeped by a mono option. I guess we'll just have to wait and see on that. Of course, with ginger, you should be using Tyranitar to farm your 20 gingers. The other new dessert dish, which is Early Bird Coffee Jelly, again another dish maybe just to cook once just to unlock the recipe, because it only has a medium recipe bonus of 35% and a medium to low recipe size, which is 42. Overall, giving you less than half of the strength you would get from Spice Cola or even macarons. Now, if you've been paying attention, you might have noticed the problem. If we have no problems with the pot size, and you do have a lot of level 60 ingredient specialists farming enough of your ingredients to be constantly cooking these 61% recipe bonus dishes, currently there are actually some Pokemon that won't be very useful at all. And these include Dragonite, Delibird, Blastoise, Venusaur, Absol, and Beware. I know it sounds funny because a lot of these have been so useful for so long. Now, if we assume that you're not going to cook any other dish and you're only focusing cooking the 61% dishes, so let's filter for the 61% dishes, look at the ingredients that aren't needed. Of course, all three will require coffee, and we're yet to see which ingredient specialist coming will farm coffee. But notice that we don't need any herbs at all, even in the curry. We don't need any eggs at all. We don't need milk, we don't need honey, we don't need cacao, and we don't even need corn. And their main farmers are the 6 Pokemon I just listed. On top of that, if you run a Gengar that is mono herb, Gengar is also not as good, because while it matches the favorite berry of the new island, Power Plant, herbs are not used at all in any of the current best dishes. Thankfully, mushrooms are used. In fact, used in abundant amount, 23 mushrooms for the curry dish. So if, for example, you're meal prepping or you're doing ingredient focused farming, these are the main ingredients that you should be focusing on. That means you won't be seeing a lot of Dragonite, Delibird, Blastoise, Venusaur, Beware, Absol being used while these dishes remain in the meta. Of course, that's not saying you can't cook the second best dishes. I occasionally swap between them. I am purely looking at this from a max potential perspective or a meal prepping perspective. Meal prepping meaning that you're preparing ingredients from one week, but actually you're using it in the next week so that you can get a head start for the new week. But there is one more assumption that I made that I only briefly mentioned. These 3 dishes would only be top tier if we assume Rousing Coffee is actually relatively easy to farm. If for whatever reason the 3 new ingredient specialists all don't do coffee very well, then the rate of farming the ingredients may jeopardize how strong these dishes are. I'm really hoping to see a mono ingredient coffee specialist, but that may not happen because not only are coffee used in the top tier dishes right now, itself is actually a fairly strong extra ingredient. So what I mean by that is, as you should know by now, every ingredient has a base strength. For example, apple is the weakest ingredient if you're adding it as extra ingredients. Tails is the strongest with 342 base strength. Coffee with 153 base strength falls third place of all the current ingredients. It is behind only Tails and Leeks, both of which are fairly difficult to farm, and then behind Mushroom, which only recently got a good farmer for, which is Quagsire. It is stronger than both corn and cacao in its base strength. So because it's quite a powerful ingredient, I'm not sure the developers will make it easy for us to farm it, on top of the fact that it belongs to the highest recipe bonus dishes. Which brings us to talking about what ingredients the 3 new ingredient specialists will be farming: Vikavolt, Aggron, and Luxray. But before we look into that, I'd like to quickly look at the 2 new dex goals that are coming. Each time a dex goal is unlocked, a few things in the game will change. One is we're going to get a larger area bonus at 65% if you've unlocked 340 sleep styles, and then 75% if you unlock 390 sleep styles. In other words, for the long-term players who will immediately unlock the finals dex goal, you will get to 75% area bonus limit, meaning each area is getting an additional 15% area bonus. Interestingly enough, for the next 2 dex goals, we're getting a bigger jump in the area bonus cap than what we normally get. We get an additional 5% with the second last dex goal unlock, and an additional 10%, which has never happened before, with the final dex goal unlock. We will also be getting some free diamonds, handy candy, main skill seed, and ingredient ticket with the unlocking of these dex goals. But the part that's relevant to today's video is the pot capacity, which will cap out at 69. Nice. Somehow, the 69 pot capacity very neatly matches up with a level 7 cooking power-up skill, which is 31 expand pot, because together they make exactly 100 ingredient for the strongest dish in the game right now. Of course, alternatively, you can run a good cam ticket, then you don't need a cooking power-up Pokemon at all. In order to cook the Perk-up stew, you will need a 92 pot size, which can be achieved if you've got a level 6 main skill triggering once, because 69 plus 27 is 96. As for desserts, you need a pot size of 87 for Spice Cola, which is equivalent to about a level 5 main skill, triggering once on Cooking Power Up. Now, of course, just unlocking the dex score doesn't actually give you the pot size. You also have to spend your dream shards in order to actually unlock the pot. If you were wondering how much dream shards you need to get all the way to 69 capacity, assuming that you started at 57 pot size, which is the limit before this update, you have to unlock the pot size 4 times. The first time costing you about 200,000 shards, then 260, then 340, then 440,000 shards in total to get to the 69 pot size is 1.2 million shards. Now, if this seems like an increase to what you were expecting, it's because they did change these numbers. So these numbers were actually previously data mined, but developers have the freedom to change the numbers as they wish because the feature hasn't actually been unlocked. So even though we know the current numbers, for example, for 72 pot size all the way down to 84 pot size, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will stay that way. If you were wondering how much they increased the Dream Shard cost by compared to the previous data mine, these are the numbers. Next, we're going to briefly touch on the 3 new ingredient specialists, Aron, Grubbin, and Shinx. We don't yet know the skill and ingredient rate of these Pokemon, so we're not going to talk too much about these, and we're not going to talk about the ingredient list because we don't know yet. We will only know from tomorrow onwards when the actual Pokemon releases. But what we do know is their evolutionary requirements. Aron requires 40 candies and level 24 to evolve, which is pretty high for a first stage evolution, kind of like Walreign's evolutionary line. And then 80 candies and level 32 to get to Aggron. For Shinx, it's 40 candies at level 11 and then 80 candies at level 23, so it's a bit easier to evolve to Luxray. For Grubbin, it's 40 candies at level 15 and then 80 candies and a Thunderstone, but no level requirement to get to Vigavolt. So if you've been holding on to your Thunderstone, the game does give you 2 for free. If you haven't used it for Jolteon and Raichu, you can use it for Vigavolt. Otherwise, you'll have to buy one in the shop, or perhaps you got one from the Raikou event. Now, none of these 3 new ingredient specialists are going to be any good at being dual specialists. This is not a case of something like Dragonite almost beating Altaria in berry finding, because compared to their berry competitors, Aggron actually has the same speed as Steelix, and I'm assuming an average ingredient rate, it simply won't find as many steel berries as Steelix. So chances are Aggron's stats should be heavily ingredient focused, like using ingredient finding up. Luxray is a bit faster than Aggron, but we're comparing to berry specialists of its own type, and unfortunately it is slower than Raichu, which makes even less sense to be using Luxray as a dual specialist. And again, what I mean by dual specialist is if it has berry finding, would it actually be any good at farming electric berries? At this stage, I'm thinking Luxray will be heavily ingredient focused as well, so berry finding is not very useful on it, because Raichu is just simply better with berry finding. Vigavolt is also slower than the berry specialist of bug type, that is Butterfree, by about 3 minutes at base speed, meaning it's not an ideal dual specialist to use. Once again, we're probably looking at much more ingredient focused stats than berry finding stats. And the final bit of information we got from this data mine is that yes, you can actually encounter all 3 new Pokemon at Old Gold Power Plant at Basic 1 tier. But does that mean that if you just take a nap immediately after going to Power Plant, you will be able to find these 3 Pokemon? Unfortunately, that's not the case, because there's also a minimum Drowsy power requirement. Something like a Pikachu only has a 76,000 Drowsy power requirement. By comparison, Grubbin has a 1.5 million Drowsy power requirement, Shinx also has a 1.5 million Drowsy power requirement, and Aron has a 2 million Drowsy power requirement. So if you want to be encountering these 3 Pokemon at Power Plant on the first day, you need to make sure you have this amount of Drowsy power at minimum. In other words, if you're looking at encountering Aron on the very first nap, you should have at least 100,000 Snorlax strength, because 100,000 Snorlax strength times 100 sleep score is 10 million, but if you're doing about a 20% sleep score session, that gives you then about a 2 million Drowsy power. But of course, that's a minimum requirement. You need to be above this number in order to encounter Aron. Thank you for watching, guys. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video looking at the ingredient list of the 3 new Pokemon.